Hey there, in this video we're going to be making the weapons menu. So the weapons menu is shown on the screen and you can select between the weapons that you've acquired from the defeated bosses. In this case I don't have any, but it would show them here listed out with their current energy values. And then you'd be able to select between them by pressing the up and down. And then it shows how many lives I have, not including the one that I'm currently playing on. So I actually have 3, but it's showing the 2 that I have left over, not including this. And when you pause and go, you can hear there's no music, and when you go to the weapons menu, the background music's not playing. You'll also notice that the score disappears and any energy bars over here disappear as well. So, and if we go into it, you can hear the background music is still playing. So now we're going to go over to my version, and we're going to see that in action. So let's play it. Game's going to start. Now I have it tied to pressing enter, so we're going to press enter. You can see my score disappeared, my energy bars disappeared, everything else on the screen like enemies and everything disappeared. I can press up and down, and I can't select anything because I'm on my current one because I don't have any defeated enemies. And as well, I have 2 additional lives, not including the one I'm playing on right now. And if I pause it and I go into it, you can see that the same thing, except now the background music isn't playing. And if you play the original, if you try to hit the pause key from being inside the weapons menu, you can't unpause out of it. You have to actually use the key that got you into the weapons menu to let you back out. So we're going to go over here and collect this life. And you can see now I have 3 additional lives, not including the one I'm playing now, so I really have 4. And then we're going to go collect the magnet beam. And now you can see that I have another weapon. So now I can select between them, up and down. So I'm going to select the magnet beam. So now you can see that I switched to it. And I'm going to use some of that energy. And I'm going to go back in the menu, and you can see that it reflects how much energy I've used on that. I'm going to switch back over to my Mega Buster, and then you can see that I'm on that Mega Buster now. So we're going to build that today. Stop right there, and we're going to pull up the previous project. So let's get started. So I have the previous project open from video 29, which is pausing the game. Now if you didn't watch that video or do that project, you might want to check that one out first because the weapons menu makes use of pausing the game. So all the projects are in my description in my GitHub, so you can check that out. All the assets as well. If you just go into the assets folder of each project, you can find all the files, all the graphics and everything. And what we're going to be making use of for this video is off of the Spiders resource, and it's basically this big image here that's got basically a breakdown of the weapons menu. You have the animation for all the tiles that fill in and when they go out. And you have a template here. Can't really zoom in, but check it out when we look at the actual game. You have a template here that has basically the layout, and then all the letters, the icon, and the color palettes. So this has everything that you basically need to be able to rebuild the weapons menu. And what we're going to do is, I'm not going to, usually I build everything out from scratch, but because this thing is very elaborate, I'm not going to do that. So what I suggest is you go and get all those files, and then you can just import them into your project. Because what I'm going to do is basically go over the construction in it, but I'm not going to actually do the construction of it. So the project is, there's animations. So in the animations folder, there's a menu subfolder, and then a weapons, and it's got the animations that we use for that with the controller. And then we also have the graphics, which is the sprite sheet I was talking about from the Spiders resource. And if you actually open this up, I actually made the purple areas transparent so that it'll be transparent when you use it in your game. And then you'll have the prefab, which is, I have prefab of the weapons menu, but I just prefab the entire canvas. I'll make it easier, so you can just drop in the canvas. And so that's in there, so you're going to want that. And then of course the script that makes all the code that makes it work. So you're going to want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just send all that over to my project. So we're going to first, so let me actually, what you would do is you could just basically go into your project folder, show the location, and you can just kind of drop all those files, copy and paste them, and then switch over to the project. So that's how you can do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send over the animations along with the meta file. I'm going to send over the graphics, and we're going to send over the prefab, the canvas, and the meta file for it, and then the scripts, and then that, and then that leaves whatever the differences are between these files, the changes I made from the previous project to work in this project. So let's just shrink that up. We're going to come back over to this. The first thing we're going to do, if you've been following along, is you're going to also need, if you haven't, there's another graphic from that assets folder. It's actually the enemies, the life and energy bars. So we're going to make use of this one here, the menu, because it's a long horizontal one and I don't want the little chunked up version. So we're going to cut that out. We're going to name it menu, and if you use my assets and my prefabs, you're going to want to name it exactly the same, otherwise you're going to have to probably reassign a bunch of stuff. So you're going to call it menu, and then the pivot you're going to put in the left center, so it's over here on the left. Apply that, close that. So now if we go over to the prefabs and canvas, we can open this up, and I'm going to bring it over here, and now you can see it. So here's the prefab. So this is basically the construction of the canvas along with the entire weapons menu. So I'm just going to go over this real quick. We're going to see how this thing was built out, and then we're going to work on making all those changes. So we're going to have a new canvas. So what you're going to want to do, actually let me just make this a little bit easier to deal with. There. So we have a canvas. Now placement doesn't matter because it's a canvas, but what you're going to want to do is you're going to scale with the screen size. So you're going to change the scale mode. The rest of the stuff, all default, should be fine, unless you did anything special with your project. Then we're going to add in another game object here. We're going to name it weapons menu. Now this is basically the background. So this is the background here. And we're going to anchor it to the very center of the canvas, and then you're going to change its position. So what it really does is it puts it a little bit to the right side of the center, so to try and mimic the game. So these are the positions that I use, and this is the width and the height for it. And we're going to add on an animator and an image, and then the script, the C# script here, and also uses the color swap because when you switch between the levels, the actual weapons menu changes color based on the palette. So we're going to make use of the color swap shader, and if you don't use that, then you're going to have to make use for whatever you use. And on the image, we use the template. So the template from the image, if I go over here and just take a look at that graphic, here's the template. So I just basically cut this out, and we'll go look at the graphics in a sec, which I should probably did first. So we're going to go over to the graphics, and we're going to see how the graphics were cut out. And let's go to weapons menu and sprite editor. So basically, each of these tile sections here is cut out. Now you can name them whatever you want, and I use the pivot in the center. So there's basically 15 of them, so 1 through 15. And here's the template, so I just call it template. And then this is the appearing, and this is when it disappears or when the tiles go out. So it's the same thing as 15, but I call it disappear. And then all these, the icon for the 1-up, and then all these letters, I say letter blue and then the letter. So like this one over here is letter blue P. And then you got the white versions, and then you have all the numbers. And then these are the palettes, which we don't cut out or anything like that. So, but for here, so we just put the template on here so you can use it to be able to align stuff. Now, when the animation plays in, it actually overrides the image. So you don't have to worry about that. Here's actually the template. And the material is set to the color swap. And the animator, which is the animations here. So if we actually have to, I'm not going to be able to see it because it's not on the screen, but when we get to it, check it out. But the animations here, basically you can see this is where it tiles in. So this is the appearing, and then this is the disappear. Now on the appear, I have events. So at the very beginning I have an event called show menu start animation. And at the very end, I have one that says show menu end animation. So we need to have this event. This is called before the animation starts. This is called when the animation ends. So there's certain things we have to prepare, and there's certain things we have to have ready for when it's done animating. And on the disappear, it's pretty much the same, except this one's exit menu start animation. So this is going to be called before the exit. And then we have one down here that's called exit menu end animation. And this is called at the very end. So this will kind of like do a little bit of cleanup or whatever, hide stuff. So these are the animations. And then the controller is basically tied to this animator here that basically uses those two animations. And the template, the color swap, and then the script, we'll go over to script separately, but these are basically all the defaults that are set in the script except for the menu, the select sound, which is actually number 3 from the audio. And we're going to default to Cutman's palette. And I actually have this option here called custom, where you can set custom colors if you want, which I'll show you in a little bit. And then we have the events that are tied to when it goes in and when the menu comes in and when it goes out. We don't pre-assign them because when the scene reloads, these events, they disappear. So what we do is we reassign them each time that the scene loads, and we'll get to that code separately. Now we have the letters down here, so based off of the background and the animation, we have the letters, so we have a group here for lettering, and you can basically anchor that in the top left because everything's going to be based off of up here that's going to align from the background. And then we have each of these letters. So if you set up the one letter, you can basically duplicate it and fill the rest of them in. So we're just going to go over the B. So the position of B is right there, based off the anchor in the upper left. And we're going to have an image tied to that, and that's going to be, in this case, the blue B. Now these get changed through code, so they'll be white when it's selected, etc., and start flashing. And then we also have a canvas group, so that we can basically set the alpha to 0 or 1 to make it visible or invisible. So that's basically for the letter B, and then you would duplicate it, and you would just change the locations and the graphics for each of these and the names. So, like, there's E, that's position. You can see when you're watching over here as it changes. There's I, C for Cutman, Fireman, Firestorm, and then the Magnet Beam and the Mega Buster are the P for player. So those are all locations and the graphics associated. So that's for the lettering. Then we have the energy bars. Now the energy bar we had before is vertical. This is horizontal, so it's a little bit different. That's the same principle. And it's also anchored in the top left and repositioned. So that's for the group. And then what we have is each individual energy bar. So we're just going to talk about the hyperbomb, and the rest are all the same with just different names and locations. So the hyperbomb is also anchored in the top left. You can see it right here. And we have an image here with no sprite on it. I just set the background color to black. And it's got a canvas group on it, so you can basically turn this thing on and off. So like I say, in this case, now it's gone. It'll be invisible. Now then, boop, it comes back. Don't worry about that template in the back. I think that's overridden. And then you have the mask, and then you have the actual energy bar here. And the mask will basically, when you change the mask size, it basically will have that black exposed so that you only have the bars that will basically visually represent how many bars are left at energy. So it's just like the vertical one that we're using, except this is horizontal. And so those are the energy bars. Then down here we just have the icon. It's just a static icon, and with the location anchored in the top left. And then the lives, I opted to actually break the numbers into individual objects instead of trying to mess around with getting the font size perfect so it matches. If to use like Text Mesh Pro and the MegaMan font. So I just opted to use the graphics and objects, and we just fill in the appropriate value by picking the letter or the number that's going to be filled in here. So this is live 0, so the first one, and then we have lives 1, which is the second one. And that basically is the construction of the menu itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the code changes. So let's start this. We're going to refresh that. That should go away. Graphics is now, they're all good. All right, so I don't know, I don't remember making a change to, if you use my color swap that I put into one of the videos to make MegaMan change colors and the bonus items. I don't remember making this change. I mean, this has been here, but I don't remember making a change, but you might want to bring that over just to be safe. So it's got the transparency flag, the float. So we're going to bring that over and save that. So I don't remember making change, but I must have. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had the difference. So we're going to skip the player prefab and do that separate, and we're not going to mess around with the scene for this. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do the color swap script file first. So because the color swap, when I originally got it from somewhere, the article from the one video, and it basically uses a sprite renderer. But because our weapons menu actually sits on the UI, it doesn't make use of the sprite renderer, it actually makes use of the image. So although they are still sprites, technically the object is actually an image, so this isn't going to work. So we have to make changes to it to make it work. So what we're going to have to do first is we're going to import the Unity Engine UI namespace, and then we're going to bring in this variable here called image. And then we're going to check here if the sprite renderer is equal to null, because this script is attached to whatever game object, and what it's going to, and you should have a sprite renderer on there because to make use of actually doing the color swapping shader. And so we're going to check and see a sprite renderer. If it's null, then we're going to get the image. Now, if this isn't set either, then it's going to crash out regardless. So we're just going to check and see if sprite renderer is null. If it is, then we're going to fill in the image instead. So we're going to bring that over. And then down here in the init color swap texture function here, we're going to see if sprite renderer is also not, if it's not null, we're going to use this code, which we had originally. But if it is null, then we're going to check down here and see if image isn't null either. Then we're going to use this for the image. It's basically the same thing. It's just it's a different object. And so we're going to send that over. So those are the changes that we're making for the color swap shader so that we can use it on the UI. And then the next things we're going to do is we're going to make changes to these scripts here that have to do with the enemies and the items and stuff. So let's start with the enemy controller. So in the last one, we made it so that we could freeze everything. Well, now we have to have it so that we can hide everything. Because when you go into the weapons menu, everything on the screen gets hidden. All the enemies, all the bonus items, any explosions, etc. So we have to have a way to be able to hide all that stuff. So we're going to be making changes to all those scripts that have to do with freezing. The same thing now we're going to do with hiding. So that's just a comment, and what we're going to do is we're going to capture the current color, and then we're going to set them to transparent or clear. And when we want to restore it, then we'll just restore the color. So this is basically holding the original color. So we're going to send that over, and then we're on the enemy controller class right now. And then down here, so this is basically the same, except the ones that use color swap, the function's a little bit different, and we'll get to those. So this is actually going to be a public function called hide enemy. And if we hide it, what we're going to do is we're going to capture the current color and save it. We're going to set the sprite's color to clear, which is to make it transparent so it'll disappear from the screen. And if we set this to false, it's going to take whatever is in there and restore it. So if you call it before that, obviously you're going to have problems. But we're going to send that over, save that. And then we're going to do it for the bomb script. So the same thing, so it's just a comment addition. We're going to capture the current bomb color. And then we're going to hide the bomb. It's exactly like the other one, except with a little bit of names different. And then save that. And then the bullet, same thing. So we're going to capture its color with bullet color. Then we're going to come down here and we're going to add this function to hide bullet. Send that over, save that. And then we're going to do the magnet beam. So we're going to capture the magnet beam's color and save it and restore it. And then down here, the explosion, same thing. I'm going to capture the explosion color, and then we're going to be able to hide the explosion and restore it. Save it. And then the item. So we're going to send that over, and you're going to see here that the item, we're using a float. Now that's because the item, the bonus items also make use of the color swap shader, and I built in that transparency flag. So we're going to count, and that's basically a value of 0 to 1. So it's like a scale for how transparent it's going to be. If it's 1, it's fully opaque. If it's 0, it's completely transparent. If it's anywhere in between, then it's obviously it's translucent. So we're going to capture it as a float instead of a color variable. So we're going to send that over. I'm going to come down here. So this is how it differs from the others. It's the same logic though. If we're hidden, what we're going to do is we're going to capture the transparency from the material and save that float value, and then we're going to set it to 0 to make it transparent. And then once we restore it, we're going to take whatever we saved and just put it back on there and make it visible again. So we're going to send that over. And on here we have an extra item here on the collision. So what we're going to be looking for is if the extra life. And if MegaMan happens to collect that extra life, we're going to call this function off the game manager, which we don't have yet, but we're going to add. It's called add player lives, and we're going to add that one life to the player. So we're going to send that over, and then we're going to save that and close. So then what we're going to do is we're going to look at the player controller, and the player controller, we're going to, he also uses the color swap shader, so we're going to need to catch a float. So we're going to send that over, and then I'm going to skip this for right now. I'll explain that in a sec. We're going to come down here, and here's the hide player, just like the bonus script, where it basically captures the float, sets it to 0 to transparent, and then we restore it. So we're going to send that over. Now back up here. So we're going to get to explaining the code for the actual weapons menu, but this is the original order in which I put things. Now to make things line up right, to be able to switch between the weapons and everything, I ended up reordering these so that they match the order that's on the weapons menu. So I don't have to try to do some funky mapping or anything like that. So everything is basically apples to apples in alignment and basically in indexes and stuff like that. So I ended up renaming this, and because I ended up renumbering or redoing this list, we end up having to fix the player prefab, which isn't a big deal, but we're going to get to that in a sec. So we're going to send that over and save that. So then we're going to close that. So that's pretty much everything except for the player prefab. We don't care about the scene, but now we're going to do the game manager. So in the game manager, we're going to have these two game objects that we're adding in here. One for the heads-up display canvas, which is basically the scoreboard and the energy bars on the left. So we need access to that. And we're also going to have a new game object that's going to be access to our weapons menu. So we're going to send that over. Then we're going to add in a new bool here that's called pause music. So it's either paused or it's not paused. I'm going to send that over. And then we're going to have a bool here that says in weapons menu. This is going to be a flag. Are we in it or are we not in it? So we're going to send that over. And then we're going to keep track of our lives. So we're going to send that over. And then we also need to know what weapon MegaMan is currently using. So we're going to save that on this variable. So we're going to save that. Now over here, we're going to default the player lives to 3, obviously. But we're going to actually fix this up in the next video after this, which has to do with the game over screen. So right now we're just going to drop in this player lives equals 3, but we'll clean that up in the next video. Now down here on scene loaded, what we're going to do is we're going to look for the heads up display canvas and set that to the variable. And then we're also going to look for the weapons menu game object and save that there. And then what we're going to do here is if we did capture the weapons menu, then we're going to execute this. And what this is basically doing is we're adding on the event listeners. And so for the show menu event and the exit menu event, which are in the weapons menu script, which we're going to get to. So we have these two functions that are down lower. One's called on weapons menu enter, and the other's called on weapons menu exit. So these are events that are going to be called from those animation events. And then what we're going to do initially is we're going to set the weapons menu to not inactive, so it's off the screen. So we're going to send that over. And then what we're going to do inside of our update here, we have P key for pausing the game, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the enter key or the return key to show the weapons menu. So you can use whatever key you want, and I'm going to use enter, and we're going to send that over. Then we're going to come down here. So now we have that function for adding the player lives. We're going to put it down here by the score point stuff. So we're just going to increment our player lives whenever a live is collected. So we're going to send that over. Now down here, we're going to edit the pause game function. Now, if you followed along in the last video, this is where we built in the pause game. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add this parameter pause music. We're going to default it to true. So whenever you pause the game normally, it does suspend the music. So that's why we're going to default this to true. So we're going to send that parameter over. And then we're going to add this in here. If pause music, then we're going to pause the music. But if we don't, then this won't be called. So we're going to send that over. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to check and see if the player object isn't null. And if it's not null, then we're going to capture the current weapon that the player has and save it in that variable that we declared above. So we're going to set that there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add to this else if. And if it's not also not in the weapons menu, so we're going to send that over. And then that's just a comment addition. Now we're going to see if the game music was paused, then we're going to start playing it again. And we're going to do something with the teleport. And actually, we don't do anything with the teleport. Actually, it's below this. This is just, actually we do. We comment it out because we're going to use switch weapon instead. So we're not using the teleport player anymore. We're actually going to be using the player controller's switch weapon because whatever weapon we captured from the weapons menu, that's what we're going to send over to the player, so they're going to switch to that weapon. So we're going to send that over. Just going to scroll over so you can see what this looks like. So we're going to call switch weapon and pass it the weapon that the player is on now. Now these are the new functions here. So this is new stuff here. So what we have that in weapons menu, we're going to create a function out of that and pass back the value of that and make it public. And then we're going to have a public void here that says show weapons menu. This is what's over there with when you're pressing the enter key in the update function. So what we're going to see is if we can't pause the game, then we don't want to show the weapons menu. So if you can pause the game, then we should be able to show the weapons menu. So we don't want the menu going off when it's not supposed to. So the pause, the allow game pause that we used in the last video, that's basically what's which modifies this variable here. And so whenever you set that, that's when you can basically kind of controls when this menu can be shown too. And then if we're not in the weapons menu, we want to be able to execute this code, and then we're going to make sure that the weapons menu is not null and the player isn't null either. And if both of those cases are true, then what we're going to do is we're going to call this function here called setMenuData, which is in the weapons menu script, which we're going to get to. We're going to pass it the lives that we have. We're going to pass it the weapon from the player, and we're going to pass it the current data structure from the player that has all the weapon data in it. And then we're going to set that over to the weapons menu script. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call the weapons menu script's show menu function. So that should start the whole ball rolling with the animating on the screen, etc. to bring it up. And if it's the opposite, if we're not, then what we're going to do is we're going to call the exit menu. And this gets out of the weapons menu when it's on the screen. And down here, these are basically the events that we're going to be calling. So on weapons menu enter. So this is going to be called when the weapons menu starts up. So we're going to make sure the game is not paused. We're going to pause not pause the set the pause music to false because we don't want to pause the game music, and then we're going to call the pause game. And then afterwards, if we are the opposite, we're going to keep the menu playing. You can figure this out. It's confusing after a while. Then we're going to play the pause menu clip, which is the sound bite. And then if this HUD canvas isn't null, which is basically contains the score and the energy bars, we're going to set it to inactive so it disappears off the screen. We're also going to hide the player, and then we're going to call this function called hide everything, which is basically similar to freeze everything, except we're going to hide all the enemies, hide all the explosions, hide all the bonus items, etc. And then we're going to say that we're inside of the weapons menu. So that's when we enter the menu. And when we exit the menu, this is called the other event that's tied to the weapons menu. We're going to put the HUD canvas back, so we should be able to see our score and energy bars again. We're going to get the player back on the screen, so we should be able to see the player. We're going to capture the weapon that was selected from the weapons menu. So we're going to save that in our game manager script here. And then we're going to say we're not in the weapons menu anymore, and then we're going to unpause the game, and then depending whether the music is paused or not. If we're in pause, then the music should already be paused. If we're not in pause, then it should still be playing when we're in the weapons menu. So it just depends on which course we took. So then we're going to send that over. And then this is all the hide stuff. So hide all the enemies. This is all stuff that you can check out. It's very much like freeze, except now we're calling all the hides. So hide the enemies, hide the explosions, hide the items, and hide the weapons. And here's one that just calls everything, says hide everything. So then we're going to send that over, and that's all the changes that we're making to the game manager. So now if we go back over to Unity, cool. So then we're going to go over to scripts, and we're going to talk about the actual weapons menu script. We're going to do that in Visual Studio. Alright, so in here we have this weapons menu script, which is actually attached over to our weapons menu game object. So we have an animator, which we already talked about. We have the color swap, where we can choose what palette we're going to use, or custom. We have the lives that get passed from the set menu data, and then we have what weapon and all the weapons data, the player weapons data, all the weapons the player has and the current energy values, etc. Then we have this flag here called can select weapon, and this is basically a flag that allows you to move up and down through the menu. So we need to be able to control when we want to be able to let the up and down arrows start working. We don't want it to just start working off the bat. Then we want to get the size of the energy bar. Now they're all the same, so we just have the one instead of the other one where we kind of kept track of them. And then we have the timer for flashing the letter for the weapon that we're currently selected on. Now we have the color swap indexes. So if you watch the color swap tutorial with the energy bars, then you know what this is about. So we have one called block 1, block 2, and background. So block 1 is if you open up the, if we actually zoom in on this. So this is block 1, this light area. This is block 2, which is this darker area, and then this is the background. So if you actually open this up in a paint program and get the red values of each of these, that's what those numbers actually come out to being. So this is red for the block 1, this is the red value for block 2, and then this is the red value for the background. So they're all different, so it's good. It'll work for our system. Otherwise, we'd have to redo something so that they're all unique. This is the palette choices. So we have a custom, the Bomb Man palette, Cut Man, etc. These are all the palettes, and those palettes are basically in that image that I just showed you. We're going to default to Bomb Man, which I believe we were supposed to default to Cut Man, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. You could default to whatever you want. And then we have the custom. So the block light, block dark, and the background. The audio clip, this is the delay in between the letter flashing, and the letters, the energy bars, the game object for the icon, for the 1-up, and the live. So these are all basically assigned through the inspector, all these game objects. So if we go back over here and we look at the script that's on here, you're going to see letters. So each of these is a letter. As you see, if you look over here, so there's the E. These are all the game objects. These are all the references, so we can access them easier. And then we have all the energy bars. There's the hyper bar, energy bar, the thunder beam, energy bar, firestorm, etc. And then you have the lives down here with live 0, live 1, which is this and this. And then you have all the sprites that are basically assigned. So you have the blue for the B, etc. All these letters down here. And then you have the white ones, which are all the same but just white color. And then you have the numbers. So there's 0 through 9. So that's that part. And then we have the events. These are the events. So upon the awake, we get a handle to our animator. We're going to initialize the flash timer, and then we're going to get the width of the image for the energy bar. Like I said, they're all the same size, so you only need to get it one. And then down here at the start, we're going to get a handle to the color swap, and then we're going to set the palette. So, and then down here, this is the update. So in the update, we're going to see if that can select weapon variable is true. And if it is, then we're going to be watching for the up arrow and the down arrow. And one thing I should have mentioned in the very beginning, because we use the pause menu the pause function makes use of delta, it makes use of the time scale. Now because we set the time scale to 0, therefore everything pretty much is at a standstill. So certain code routines, if they use like wait for time, wait for seconds or whatever, it's not going to work. Anything that uses delta time, it's going to stop functioning because there's no more delta time. So in here, what I ended up using was on the animator, you're going to see by default it's on normal, but what I ended up doing here is I set it to update mode to use unscale time. So if you were actually forget that part, if you're building this out on your own, you're going to notice that it's only going to show the one frame when you're in pause, because we basically set time scale to 0 when we pause the game before the menu pops up. So your menu is not going to animate, and it's not going to animate open. So it's important that you set your update mode to use unscale time, or you're going to have to work some other kind of code to make this animation play on its own without, using delta time or the time scale of the system. So just keep that in mind. And let's see here. So we're going to use, so normally I would like to use delta time here, but I'm using actually unscaled delta time. So this one will still react and actually have a value. So we're going to decrement the timer so this will be flashing the letter. Anyway, up here in the up, so what we're going to do is we're going to find the next available weapon and we're sending this string of up. So we'll get to that, it's a little bit lower. And then we're going to update the weapon letters, which basically is now that you've chosen a different weapon, something else is going to be the next one that you select is going to be white, and then all the other ones are going to be blue. So this basically updates all the letters, all the sprites. And then we play that sound clip of the selection, doot, 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 etc. Down, it's the same thing, except we're going to be passing down, so we're going to look downward through our list of available weapons and choose the next one that's available. And on the weapon scale, or the flashing timer here, what we're going to do is we're going to get the value of our alpha for the canvas group for for whatever weapon that we're on. Whichever one is selected, we're going to get the alpha. And then we're going to check and see if it's 1. And we're just going to, basically we're going to flip them. So if it's 1, it's going to become 0. If it's 0, it's going to become 1. So we're flipping the alpha on it. And then we're going to reset the timer here. So basically that's what causes the flashing of the letter, this little code here. So then we have show weapon menu. This is called from over in the game manager. This is what's going to be starting the whole thing with showing the menu. So we're going to call our show menu event. We're going to invoke. This is when before it's shown. And then we're going to do the tiling animation, and we're we're going to set the game, we're going to shut this to active, our weapons menu, so it comes up on the screen, and then we're going to play our appear animation. We exit the menu, we're going to play our disappear animation. Remember, these things have events in them, so certain things are going to be called. Like here, show menu start animation. So we're going to call this thing here called toggle events. Let's just go down here for toggle events. So what toggle events is going to do is it's going to set all the letters to active, all the energy bars to active. It's going to set the 1 up to active and the 2 life numbers. So it's going to set this, so it's either going to be true or false. So in that case, what we're doing is we're setting false. So this is basically going to hide all those items. At the end of the animation, we're going to turn them all on, just so that, although we're going to hide the thing. Initialize the menu. Oh, this is at the end of the animation, actually. So at the end of the animation, we're going to show all those letters and numbers. We're going to initialize the menu, and we're going to say, yes, now we can allow the keyboard to start working so we can pick what weapon that we want to choose. And at the end of the start animation, hide all the elements. And so, yeah, so when the menu goes out, we want to hide them all, and then we don't want to be able to select any weapon. Let the weapon selection happen. And then we're going to exit the end animation. So we're going to set the game object to false, so it's going to hide it, and we're going to call the end menu, the event. And down here, this is where we get the weapon menu data. So we're going to get the lives, get the weapon type, and we'll get the weapon data from the player. These two from the player, this from the game manager. And then down here we have the weapon selection, so whatever weapon we end up choosing through the menu, we can grab from here and get passed back. So that actually happens over there in the game manager. And then upon initializing the menu, we're going to update the player lives, we're going to update the letters, and we're going to update the energy bars. This basically sets all these things up so before they get displayed. So we'll come back to this. So updating the lives, all we're going to do is we're going to see how many lives that we have. Minus the 1, obviously, like I said, you're on 1, but to be visible is whatever you have minus 1. So the left number is the 10s, and then the other one's the 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide by 10, and that'll be how many 10s of lives we have. So it should be, we start out with 3, it should be 0. And then the remainder of 10, so that'll be, okay, we have 2. So that's how we fill in lives 0 and lives 1. Update weapon letters. We're going to see whichever one that we're select on. It's either going to be white or blue, so we're going to update the sprite. And we're going to check and see if that's a weapon that we have. If it is, then we're going to make sure that the canvas is opaque so we can see that that's a weapon that we have. Otherwise, we'll set to 0 so it'll be invisible. The energy bars, it's the same difference. So that's for the letters, the energy bars. If it's a weapon that we have, it's going to be visible. If it's a weapon that we don't have, it's not going to be visible. And then we're going to set how much energy that bar has by manipulating the size of the mask. And then down here is the palette. So all these are basically, this is the custom palette, so which is over in the inspector. So we're going to play around with that. And then we have all the palettes for Bomb Man, Cut Man, and Wily 3 happen to be the same. So all these are all hex codes that you can get from that big image. And I basically do all the hard work for you. These are all the hex codes for all those colors. And this is how we set the palettes. Excuse me. And down here, we set the palette. So that's what they called in the start. So we initialize in the start. And we can, it's also public, so you can initialize, you can call this set menu palette. It's actually 2 versions of it. So there's one that actually uses this enum, and then there's this other one that uses the individual color, so it's an override. So you can call whichever function you want. So if you call this one, you have to pass it 3 ints, 1 for each color. Or you just give it the enum, and then it'll pick whatever the appropriate palette is and set the colors in motion. So anyway, that's basically the weapons menu script. It's not that long. It's actually not that hard either. It's just really time consuming to build it out. So Now that that's set, we're going to go make a change over to our player. So let's get out of here. We got to go and edit our player prefab. So we're going to come over here to our player prefab. Let's lock this. Now, because we changed our weapons data structure, all these things have been basically renamed, but all the data that was in them has now got the wrong info in it. So before we do that though, so I don't forget, I don't know why this is set like this. I don't know if in one of the other videos I only did it to the current copy of the player, but this is actually not supposed to be the default sprite material. It's supposed to be the color swap. So we're going to edit that. So this is supposed to be the color swap material for our player. So we're going to set that. Now down here, our default weapon that we always start on is the Mega Buster, so we're going to set that. And this hyper bomb is not going to be active. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set these things up. So the hyper bomb's cost is actually 2, the damage is 4, it has no audio, and the weapon is the bomb. Now this thunder beam, we're going to zero this out. We're going to nuke that. Super arm, which is also, nope, get rid of the bomb. So these are all defaulted again, that's fine. Now at the very bottom is the magnet beam. So our magnet beam is supposed to have a cost of 2, and there's no weapon damage. The clip on it is 17, and our platform beam is the game object. And on the Mega Buster, which is enabled, our damage is 1, there's no cost to it. Our audio clip is actually 5 for the Mega Buster, and our bullet is the prefab. So that's the changes. So now we can get out of the player. So now if we come back over to this, we can exit out of that, refresh it, just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Now the only thing that's got changes is the main scene. So that's it for all that stuff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our canvas here. We're going to bring on our menu canvas. I'm just going to put it here between the HUD and the input. And now if we actually bring this out, there you go. So now you can see this is the weapons menu right here. So this is what it looks like when it's built out, and this is its positioning that's going to be on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to disable all of our enemies here. So let's turn all those guys off. And then we're going to add a life. Let's go put that over here-ish. We're going to bring that down like right there. And we're going to change the position on that. So that's going to be negative 16.86, and the Y, because there is physics involved, start landing on the ground, that's going to be 4.520499. So it's actually behind here, you can't see it, but if you look over here, now it's sitting on the highway. Alright, so let's save that. Let's try this out. Hope I didn't forget anything. And if we run it, so I'm going to press enter. There's my weapons menu. See my P is flashing. I can press up and down. I got nothing to select from. So, ooh, you know what? That is the one thing I think I forgot to talk about. Let's see, where's that at? Here. When we're finding the next weapon. So we have the string up or down. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the current weapon. Now this is why I said I want everything to line up, and that's why I redid the enum and the player. So everything is basically apples to apples. So it's this maps to that location, that maps to that location. Makes it too complicated. So whatever weapon, the index is the same, the enum is the same in the data structure. So and it matches the lettering on the weapons menu. So everything is equal. Makes it so much easier to deal with. So we're going to get whatever our weapon is, and then we're going to see how many weapons total there are. So this case, there would be like, I think there's like 8 or 6 or something like that. So when we hit up, we're going to be stuck in a while loop. And so this is very similar to our switch weapon that we used in the debug in the player a while ago. So if we press up, it's going to go up an index. We're going to negate one. If it happens to go below 0, then we want it to go to the maximum weapons -1. So it would go to, there's 8 of them. So this would go up to 7. This would go to 7. And then we're going to check and see if it's enabled. If that weapon from our data structure in the player, if it happens to be enabled, we're going to get out of here. If not, we're going to decrement one more time and check it again until we find the next available weapon. So whatever is hidden on the screen, doesn't matter. We're going to skip those. So the data, player weapon data. So however, if nothing is enabled, obviously we'd be stuck in this while loop, but your Mega Buster should always be enabled. And if you want to check that, if there's none of them before you actually enter this, you can always do that. Down is the opposite, so if you press down, you're going to be going positive through the array. So we're going to go +1, and if it happens to be greater than the max weapons -1, then we're going to go back, we're going to start at the index of 0, the very first one, which would actually be the hyper bomb. And then we're going to see if that weapon happens to be enabled that we're picking, and if it is, we're going to break out of it. So now what our next index weapon is, and that's what we're going to pass back. So I just forgot to talk about that. I skipped over that. So that's how you find the weapons. So when you're going up and down, basically traverses the data structure to see what's enabled and what's not enabled, and it'll skip the ones that are not enabled and only focus on the ones that are enabled. So if all you have is the Mega Buster and you're hitting up and down, you're basically picking the same thing over and over and over. So I want to say that. So now let us start it again. So let's test it out. So where you hit enter, you hear the background music is still playing. I press up, I press down, 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 nothing. I got 3 lives, 2 are visible. I'm on one of them, so it shows I got 2 left, not including the one that I'm on right now. So we're gonna hit enter on that. And you see my teleport is really, it's a teleport, plus it's actually the switch weapon instead of the teleport player. So I'm gonna go collect this guy, hit enter. Now I have my life, and then I got 3. So I got 4 lives, but 3 in addition to the one I'm on right now. So, and if I pause and hit enter, you can hear the background music is stopped, but I'm still in the weapons menu. Then we get out of it. So that's basically, well, let's go capture the, let's go get the magnet beam. Make sure that part works still. There. So now if I enter, my data structure from the player got updated to capture the magnet beam. Now I can switch between these, hit enter, and I switch to the weapon. Now I'm on the magnet beam. So I can use that, hit enter. You can see that some of the energy is spent. So I'm going to get out of that. And now I'm going to go over here and we're going to test out these others. We're going to choose the player here. Come down here, we're going to turn on the hyper bomb, hit enter. And you can see now Hyper Bomb is enabled. Select that, and I switch to the Hyper Bomb. I can throw my bomb around. So there you go. Now if I hit enter, you can see I can switch between them. Up, 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 up. Down, 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 down. Switch to that. Same thing. Switch to the Mega Buster. Cool. So then we're going to put on the Thunder Beam, even though that's not built out. And the Super Arm, the Ice Slasher, Rolling Cutter, Firestorm, and the rest of this. That might be a bug. That should be disappeared by now. So that might have to be inspected at some point. So checking the weapons. And what's funny about this, I don't even see it in here. Huh. Weird. Anyway. So now we have all of them enabled. So we can go Blackman, Super Arm for Gutsman, Iceman. Oh, that's weird. So, there. That shouldn't even be there. Okay. Well, that's something to look into. That's one of those fine-tuned touch-up type deals. And then Firestorm, my favorite colors. and then the magnet beam, which you already had, and then the player, or the Mega Buster. Now I can switch between all these, just up, down, left, left, up and down only. There you go. So now that is basically the weapons menu. Now we're going to check out the palette part. So before I forget. So we're going to go to this menu canvas here, select the weapons menu, and we're going to come down here to script pure palettes. Here's the palette. So it's defaulting right now to the Cutman palette. So I'm going to switch that to Bombman. So let's run it. Hit enter. That's Bombman's palette. So then we're going to switch it to Electman for the heck of it. Run it. And there, that's Electman's palette. Alright, so now let's check out the custom. So I'm going to switch it to custom. So by default right now my light block, dark block, and background are all 0. Well, that 0 equals basically black. So let's run it. See? And it's all black. So now we're going to give it a little bit of color. So this is how you can basically figure this out. So in the calculator in hex, so I want, like, let's say I want the background to be red. So I'm going to FF0000, all hex codes, right? So I'm going to copy that decimal value there. I'm going to paste that. So that's my red. So let's run it. So now I'm going to hit enter. So now I got a red background. So I'm going to stop that there. Now let's say I want to do white RGB. So there's white. Copy, that's the decimal value. I'm going to put that on the light block. It's because the light comes down from the top left. I'm going to paste that in there, and now I'm going to run it. Then we're going to hit enter. So there. So there's my light, my white, my black, and my red. So there's my custom palette for my weapons menu. So that's how you can basically use the custom. So you don't have to be fixed on any of these colors, these color schemes. So you can use any color you want if you use that. So you can build that into yours. Anyway, that now brings us to the very end. So that is the weapons menu in action. So you can basically use the prefabs. It makes it a lot easier, and then you can go through the prefab in your project, and you can see how they were constructed. It would have taken way too much time to build them out here. I already took enough time to go through all the code changes. So anyway, if you found the video helpful, give it a thumbs up. I always appreciate that. If you haven't followed or subscribed to the channel, feel free to subscribe. There's going to be some more videos before I call it the end of MegaMan, and then maybe just put out some little addendums here and there to keep enhancing it. Anyway, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.